Hey everyone, thanks for joining me on the Ready to Fight podcast. I'm your host, Bruce Kimbrell. Along with me today is a great friend of mine. It is Kevin Schroder. Kevin, it's good to see you, my friend.
Good to be here.
Yes, sir. Brief introduction on Kevin. Kevin Schroder served in the United States Marine Corps from 1990 to 1994, during which he deployed to Desert Storm. After an honorable discharge from the military, he joined the police department where he served the next 21 years in the surrounding area of Houston, Texas. As a police officer, he served in the Patrol Division, Criminal Investigation Division, and the SWAT team. You were honorably retired from law enforcement in 2018 as a patrol lieutenant, and you currently work for Mighty Oaks Foundation, which is a faith-based nonprofit organization that helps veterans and first responders find hope, healing, and restoration through Jesus Christ. You are happily married to Rachel Schroder for 34 years. Congratulations on that. You have 3 children and 3 grandchildren. Kevin, again, it's good to see you, man.
Good to be here. Good to see you.
Yes, sir. Man, I was thinking the other day when I knew I had you on a schedule to come, I think we met, I might have the dates wrong, but I think we met way back in, I can't remember if it's 2018 or 2019. And I was telling a couple of my friends that you had a tremendous impact in my life. And I hope eventually we can get into this, but I remember like you reaching out and telling me about Mighty Oaks and things like that. And I remember like telling my wife, there's no way I'm going to this program. And by the end of the week, after we had some conversations and stuff, I think I ended up joining that week. So that's when our friendship began. And man, it's been great. You're an awesome, incredible man. And I absolutely love to be around you. You have a very awesome personality and you're a great leader, man. So I appreciate that.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, sir. All right, we're going to dive into this a little bit. Kevin, give us a little bit of background. Like, where did you grow up? How many siblings did you have?
All right, so I was born in Tampa, Florida. My dad was a Air Force Vietnam veteran, and I was raised with my sister. She's 2 years older than me, so lived in Tampa till I was about 7, then moved to Saline, Michigan, which is right outside Ann Arbor. Lived there for about 6 years, and then we moved to Texas, where I've been most of my life.
Awesome. Growing up as your dad was a Vietnam veteran, what was that like?
My dad was a very reserved person, very quiet. I didn't understand what it meant to be a combat veteran, especially Vietnam. I think they're a category all by themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't understand what that really meant till I got older. But childhood, I had a roof over my head and I had 3 meals a day. I was safe from any physical harm. It wasn't an ideal upbringing, though. My parents definitely struggled with marriage things and parenting and just some alcohol abuse and things like that. So it was chaotic in regards to the peace in our home. But overall, it was, like I said, I was taken care of as far as the needs that I would need.
So growing up in that type of environment, obviously different struggles and things like that. What was it like relationship-wise with your parents and your siblings, your sister?
I have to be honest with you, there was a lot of fear and anxiety because my parents did fight a lot, and that usually meant that my dad would either get kicked out of the house or he would leave. And, for days at a time, I remember riding my bike as a kid to different parks and stuff where he would frequent. My dad, he was a suit and tie guy. He worked in Ann Arbor, and, he would take bird baths in a park, right? Because he's living out of the car. Nobody would have known. Nobody would have known that was going on in our house, and I would go to the parks just to visit him, see what park he was at, ride my bike, so that's a lot in my memory. One thing I did not see was conflict resolution. And I think that would be the biggest negative impact in my life because it is something that I took into my marriage, and it almost cost me my marriage, but it's something that I've really had to work on and break that chain, that bondage of like running from conflict and stuff. So I really had to face it, and it was hard. It was a struggle, but it's just kind of something that was passed to me as when I was a kid. So, my parents would fight like cats and dogs, sometimes police involved and stuff, all the way up until they got divorced when I was a senior in high school.
Wow. Growing up, did you go to church? Did your parents go to church?
We would go through small seasons where we went to church. It was predominantly a Catholic church. The times I remember is like the holidays, but it wasn't anything to where it was lived out at home, and it was we went to church less than we went, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So going to high school, you went to high school in Michigan, correct?
No, I moved to Texas when I was in the 8th grade, a town called Bay City. That's where Rachel was born and raised. And we went to the same high school for 4 years. And we met the second semester of our senior year, about 2 months before we graduated.
Awesome. So Rachel's your wife.
Yes.
And so you ended up marrying her later on in life. So what year did you graduate high school?
90.
Okay. So you went basically from the high school, you joined the military pretty much right away then?
Yeah, so my parents, when I got divorced, I had about 2 months left. My dad got remarried pretty quickly. Mom took the divorce really bad. I was staying with her. And, I saw the Marine recruiter at career day and, talked to him about joining, said he would need one parent to sign. My mom wouldn't sign, but my dad signed under some conditions. And, he ended up moving out of state. And I was supposed to go to boot camp a few months after I graduated high school. But right around graduation time, like within 2 weeks of graduating, my mom said, "Hey, you have to leave. I can't do life. I definitely can't do you." So I called the recruiter, see if I could get in earlier. And I called him on a Friday, which was 2 weeks after we graduated, and because I was in the late entry program. And he said he would call me back. And he said, "Hey, can you leave Sunday to go to MEPS in Houston? And you'll fly out Monday morning for boot camp." And I was like, "Yeah." And I did it because I needed a place to stay. Rachel and I had been dating 2 months, and I just basically went through boot camp in my schools, and we got married. So graduated in June of 90, and we're married December 90.
Wow. So I want to take just a short step back. So walk us through, you come from straight out of high school, delayed entry program. 2 weeks later, you're on the Yellow Footprints. What was that like for you?
It was a culture shock because I was 17. I didn't turn 18 until 2 weeks. My birthday's 9/11, and I graduated like September 22nd or something like that. So, or 20, yeah, something like that, 22nd. So I turned 18 in boot camp. But as a 17-year-old, I was one of two 17-year-olds in our platoon, and we started off with like 90 guys, graduated with I think low 70s, and it was a culture shock for me. I mean, I definitely. The uniform looked great, but when I was in boot camp, I was like, man, it don't look that great. It wasn't until I graduated and got to put it on, but it was just a culture shock. But man, it is what I needed because like I had nobody in my life like showing me what like manhood was really about, right? And that was the closest thing, to manhood, if you will. I'm not going to say godly manhood by any means, but definitely about, I think all the military branches focus on, integrity and character and pride and respect and discipline and all that stuff. Like they instilled that in me, which has still followed me to this day and definitely through my law enforcement.
That's awesome. So graduating boot camp, you do all of your schooling and stuff. You guys, what MOS were you? Was you like an infantryman or what was you?
No, I thought that's what everybody went in as, but my dad said, he goes, I'll sign. He wasn't too big on me going in the Marine Corps, but he said, the only way I'll sign if you don't go in as a grunt, you have to go in and learn something. So I told my recruiter that, and he says, well, you could go in like anything in the engineer field. And so it wasn't until I knew I was going to be something in the engineer field. I didn't find out what it was until after Marine combat training. So, and then I got sent to welding school of all things.
Nice. Yeah. So you learned a trade while you're there.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Probably, did you ever transition into welding anytime after that?
I did. I actually did it for like 3 years in the plants before I became a police officer. So, it was actually some of the best advice my dad gave me because I got to do the Marine Corps stuff that I had to do every year, to keep up with. And as far as, Marine combat training, being out in the field, rifle range, PT and all that. But I got to learn something. And, the key, especially in the Marine Corps, because it's a small branch, the smaller the MOS, the easier it is to get promoted, so as the cutting score is low. So, and that was the case in the Marine Corps for that MOS.
That's awesome. I never knew that about you. So I learned something new today. So that's awesome.
Me and Jeremy, you just had Jeremy on your podcast recently. We share the same MOS.
Wow. I did not know that.
Yeah.
That is crazy.
Yeah.
Man, I learned something new. That is awesome. So let me ask you a question. And so you said that you and Rachel ended up getting married. At what year did you guys get married? What point after graduating all your schools did you guys get married?
Okay, so like when I met Rachel, Rachel has a different background than me. Her dad is he's now a retired pastor. He's 83, but he was a pastor at that time. Was up until just a few months ago when he retired. So she was born and raised in a Christian home. And what's unique about that, I definitely want to leave this out of the story, because she actually told her parents she wanted to go in the Marine Corps. And, she comes from a tight-knit Hispanic family, and they were like, no, because then we'd never get to see you and all that. So she remembers going out to the carport and praying for a Christian husband and a Marine. And I was neither. But during that time frame that she prayed, I would go to career day, see the Marine recruiter, and then I would meet her. And I'd start to go to church with them, and actually got saved at her dad's church. And here's another little fun bit of information. Now, 30-something years later, I am the pastor of that church.
Wow. That is incredible.
Yeah. Well, it's a bivocational, it's not a full-time gig, but after he retired, they did some prayer searching and searching for a pastor and stuff. So I got voted in to be the pastor. It's a bilingual church in Brazoria, Texas. It's Spanish, English. But anyway, I became, a Christian. I surrendered my life to Christ, and we started dating, and, I said, hey, I'm going to the Marine Corps. It's either 4 years apart or 4 years together. And the night I was at MEPS, we were dating for a hot 3 months. I had given her a promise ring. I said, hey, can we turn that into a wedding ring? That's, I'm embarrassed to say that. That's how we did things back in 1990, apparently. She said yes. And so I'd go to boot camp for 3 months, and then I'd come home for leave for like 2 weeks, then go to Marine combat training for a month. And then my welding school was 3 months. And it was right before I graduated from the welding school is when I took some leave and we got married.
Wow. So walk us through what that looks like. Now you're new in the Marine Corps, and you're newly married in the Marine Corps. What does that look like? Showing up to your unit for the first time, I'm assuming, did you guys live off post or on post? What did all that look like?
Yeah, man, it was rough, because like the day I left for MEPS, that's the day I got baptized. And, when I got to boot camp, there wasn't a welcoming for new Christians. You know what I mean? Like we're running cadence, like our drill instructors are singing cadence, like things that I've never, I'm pretty sure we shouldn't be singing this, right? And so I was young and a new Christian, but I knew that I shouldn't be saying that stuff. So that was kind of what it was like in the Marine Corps, I would imagine, in every branch. But when we did get married, they gave me a dream sheet in my welding school and said, hey, you can pick East Coast, West Coast, or overseas as far as the duty station. So I picked East Coast because at that time I had some family living on the East Coast, and they said West Coast. So I went to Camp Pendleton. And, we'd been married. We were together for 2 weeks after being married. And we didn't have a place or anything. We were just alternating between my dad's house and her parents. And they were living in different states. When I got to Camp Pendleton, they said, hey, you're only here to process to go to Okinawa. That's your duty station. You're going to be there for a year. So I was like, I told that news to Rachel. I said, hey, as soon as I get to Okinawa, I'll try to see about getting you over there. And, like I said, we been together for 2 weeks in person before I went to Camp Pendleton. And when I got to Okinawa, they said, hey, you're like brand new. I think I was a PFC still, might have been a Lance Corporal. And they're like, hey, yeah, there's no way you can bring your wife here. No, you're not going to be able to afford it. So, I was trying to navigate through that. And, Rachel called me and said, hey, that 2 weeks we're together, you left something, and that baby will be here in 9 months. I didn't like the idea of, stuff in Desert Storm was still going on and everything. And I didn't know how all that was going to be. So anyway, they needed 2 guys from my unit to join a bigger unit that was being deployed to Desert Storm. So I said, well, I'd rather go there than be on this island to think about a pregnant wife and all that. So I ended up deploying over there. So all that to say, I missed the pregnancy. And by the time I took leave, when I got back from Desert Storm in Okinawa, so I showed up 2 days after Matt was born, got to spend 2 weeks with him, went back to Okinawa, and then came back. And, we went to Camp Pendleton, California. And that's when first time we ever lived together. We'd been married a year and had a 3-month-old son. So we drive out from Texas to Camp Pendleton and, did my last 2 years in the Marine Corps there. We went to church and stuff like that, but we were really just learning to get to know one another. I mean, we had a kid we were trying to raise, so rough. Things were rough, right? It was just at that time, the military was paying once a month. That's you got a paycheck once a month. So, I was 20 and I didn't know how to budget. I didn't know how to be a husband. I didn't know how to be a dad. So it was a rough start, man. We just kind of flew by the seat of our pants really for the first several years.
Oh yeah. Man, that's crazy. So what was Desert Storm like?
When I got there, Desert Storm was a different war, man. It was like, at least the part that I was exposed to was an air war. So, the closest thing I got to combat was friendly fire. We were staying in these like Quonset hut type hooches, and a Marine, trapped the entry door with a white phosphorus grenade and set it off. So we all wake up inside there to a loud bang and a wall burning and stuff. So I just remember jumping out of the window with my gas mask. I had my green PT shorts on, combat boots, and a t-shirt. And there were two Middle Easterners outside the window that, man, I had like pressure on the trigger. Right. And they were our drivers. And so I was fortunate not to have pulled that trigger. But anyway, that was the extent of, the combat I saw. I mean, there were other times where situations got uncomfortable. But for the most part, man, it was just, I was there for 5 months. I got to learn a lot as a young man about what it was like being in a country like that during a time like that. So nothing too kinetic or anything, but it was definitely difficult navigating faith and being away from family and being in that environment.
Yeah, for sure. How did Rachel take it when she knew that you were leaving Okinawa to go there?
She wasn't happy about it at all. I mean, for her to go through the whole pregnancy by herself, that's a whole different battle. The good thing is, like, she is real close to her parents. So am I. Like, they have been a mom and dad to me. My dad passed away about a year ago. Agent Orange took his prostate, and then he would battle cancer for a number of years and end up spreading to his pancreas and other things. And he died about a year ago. But my mom is still alive and we stay in contact. But Rachel's parents have showed me what it's like to be Christian man, modeled Christian marriage to us. And so she had that support system there, but yeah, it was still tough for her because who wouldn't want their husband to be there to, enjoy that with them.
Yeah. So you get back from deployment, you finish up at Okinawa, you come back. What is the remainder of your time like being newly married now that you've been married, but you've been apart majority of it? So what is that rest of that military life like as a married man with your wife before the transition?
Man, it was, like I said, it was tough because California, it's high cost of living and getting paid once a month. Back then, I was a Lance Corporal. I ended up getting promoted to Corporal not soon after getting there. But even still, it's not a lot of pay for living in California. So that aspect was tough. It was really tough on Rachel because she was so close to her family, I mean, we laugh about it today because, that we had landlines back then. There were no cell phones. So, our landline bills range from $700 to $1,000 a month. So because she was talking on the phone with her mom, which is understandable because, like I said, there was no internet and all that back then. So, she's trying to raise a baby and be married and be in the Marine Corps. And it was just, it was tough. I still was a new believer. So I was having a hard time navigating faith in the military. But, I will say that everywhere I went, whether it was in a chaplain's tent in the desert or a Christian center in Okinawa or, the church that we went to in California, we talk about these 4 B's at Mighty Oaks, be in the word, be in prayer, be in touch with your core man, be in fellowship. I was trying to lean into those. We didn't call it that back then, but, most evangelical churches have that type of discipleship plan. I was trying to stay grounded in the word, and we were a part of a church. If it was without that, things would have been a lot worse, but it was just up and down for us because of our age and the dynamic of, spending our first year apart and having only dated for 6 months prior to getting married. And, 3 of those months we were actually together in person.
Yeah.
So it was a lot of, standing in front of a puzzle with a lot of small pieces and trying to put it together. Right. So, but, it wasn't horrible because we have good memories, I mean, it was tough, but, we'd look back at it now as like, wow, to seeing God's hand bring us through that.
Man, that's awesome. So now you guys transition. So now you transition out of the military and you're going into civilian life. What's that like?
So like when I was getting out, like the Marine Corps put you through this like transition, like a week thing. You go to different classes and stuff, and they had the California Highway Patrol come on base, and we're trying to recruit Marines from Camp Pendleton. And I was like, wow, they were kind of planted the seed because it really looked like, law enforcement uniform. It was militaristic and it draws a lot of veterans, and I was like, man, I'd like to do this. I just can't do it in California because we need to get back closer to home, where family is and stuff. So, I was 21 when I got out, and I needed to pay bills. So that's why I started working construction. And I did that for about 3 years but I really had this seed planted in me, like, man, I want to be a police officer. So, I ended up taking a low paying job. I became like the maintenance man of the church we were going to in Bay City, so I could go to the police academy at night. And I went to the police academy for 9 months, and then became a police officer in 1997.
Nice. So walk us through a little bit about the transition there now. So you're almost working 2 jobs, right? You're going to police academy at night. You're working a day shift job. Now you transition into, what are you, patrol officer at this time? You on the streets? So what is that like now, coming from the Marine Corps, and now you're on the streets in somewhere in Texas as law enforcement?
Man, I loved it. I fit in good in that environment because, there were other veterans at that department, but just the environment, period, whether you're a veteran or not, just that militaristic environment and the things that police officers do, the drive fast and arresting people and all that, but like helping people and everything too, that it was just, I fell in love with it. Definitely too much, because I kind of had my identity wrapped up in that. At that point, Matt was 7, and Rachel, I would be in that job for about 2 years, and she would get pregnant with our daughter, Kirsten. And it was during that time frame when Kirsten was born that like things went south in our family big time, because I was working night shift, and I was making compromises in my faith. I wasn't living it out. I really just kind of adapted way too much to that military or to that police environment. And it's a dark environment, because just the culture, it's a lot like the military. So I started to make some compromises, in my walk, my faith would not be the number one priority in my life. And so I would just, I'd make some decisions, that would drastically change the trajectory that we were going. Our marriage was affected by infidelity because of me. And I didn't think that there was a way to come back from that. So I would, we were married for 7 years at this point, and 4 that were in the Marine Corps, and then 3 as a police officer. And I filed for divorce, and I just ran because I was like, man, I don't know how to get out of this mess, this pit that I've dug for myself. And so that's the path that I was on early on in my career as a police officer.
What kind of effect do you think? Obviously, you and your wife are struggling. There's a lot of things going on. You named some of them there. What effect did that have on your kid?
During that time frame, Matt would see one of the things that he has told Rachel, stuck with me. She would tell me later on, because, Rachel, she had a different reaction to it. She was hurt, obviously, but she has this phrase that she's coined. It's called pray dirty. And she would pray Colossians chapter 1, verses 9 through 14 over me, which, the summary of that would be that Kevin would be in the center of your will, that you would strengthen him, and that you would just transfer him from the domain of darkness to the kingdom of your son, the kingdom of light. And she just prayed that with my name in it and stuff like that. And, my kids, Kirsten was a baby, so she doesn't even remember it. But Matt would tell Rachel that, hey, can we just go find a new dad? So that was the effect it was having on him.
Wow. So I want to dive into this part right here a little bit more, because you have a very similar situation. When I was struggling and I was in my situation, my wife was the She was the pillar, and I fell. Right. So she was the stronghold holding everything together in our house. And it sounds like that's what was going on here. So give us the perspective of your wife. So you're struggling, you're battling all these different things. You're already filing for divorce, but your wife is doing what?
Yeah, she's praying and stuff, but she's obviously affected by it negatively for obvious reasons. If you can imagine somebody going through something like that, but she would go to church, and at one point, one lady at the church says, "Hey, we have this divorce care program that you might consider going through." And Rachel's like, she's like, "This doesn't look good, but I'm not walking by sight, I'm walking by faith." And she knew that she didn't necessarily know, like she was like praying for our marriage to restore, but she wanted me restored. She's like, I know Kevin is God's child, and that's not him. The way he's acting with the life he's living right now, that's not the child of God that Kevin is. And she's like, if I just pray for Kevin to be that man, then that's probably the best chance that she has of salvaging her marriage. And so that's how she would pray, is like, that Kevin would be the man that God created him to be.
Man, that's powerful. So walk us through the next little bit. So you guys are struggling with this. You've come to her. She's praying. How long did it take to get you back to where your marriage was mended? And then not just mended, but what did that transition look like for you in a spiritual aspect?
During that time that she was praying, the time that we were actually separated, it was about 4 months, maybe 6 max. And, right around the tail end of that period, the 4 month or 6 month mark, however long it was, I never was like comfortable. I knew like inside, like, this isn't me. Like, I knew that I'd made some bad decisions. Was like, man, I just don't know how to fix this. I had already, the times that we fought when we were in Camp Pendleton in California, whenever I heard crying or yelling, like, I was out the door, because, there was no conflict resolution being raised. That's kind of like that behavior is what I adopted. So, and that's what I would do. And that's how I handled this situation. I was like, there's no recovery from this. I'd never seen anything like that. Anybody recover from anything like this? So just run, get a shovel, and just keep digging that pit. And that's what I did. But during the time that she would pray, a couple incidents, like one in particular that would, God would just kind of use in my life to get my attention, was just the death of, this young man that caused an accident unintentionally with somebody that I had some encounters with prior to that accident. And he ended up dying in the accident, and killed an 18-year-old young man and an 11-year-old girl. And, I was at that accident scene. I dealt with that person, and, it just kind of, I don't guess God used that in my life, because I just got this picture, I was going down this path of destruction. And, I just really felt like God was telling me at that time, was like, hey, you're missing out on Philippians 3:8. Which is, Paul wrote, it says that I consider all things lost in comparison to the surpassing worth of knowing Christ. And, I just really felt like God wanted me to grasp that. And he wanted to use me as a police officer to share that hope. And that accident scene would definitely shake me to the core. And it was around that time I just felt like this move in my heart. Like, I thought, man, if I don't get out of this mess, if I don't make different decisions, it's not going to be a good ending. I just felt, it's hard to explain, but I felt this impending doom inside of me. It's not like the kind of impending doom you feel when you're having like a panic attack or something, like it's an irrational fear. I just really felt like, man, if I don't make a different decision, some bad things are going to happen to me. So, I would go back and try to make things work with Rachel. And we felt like one of the things that we needed to do was move out of that town, get a fresh start. And that's what we did. We moved to League City, where, my police time with the other agency, Bay City, I would tie into the League City time. And I would, start as a League City officer, and I wasn't there 4 months. And I was on the fence, because even though we were in a new place, like trying to put the pieces back together after infidelity and, just whatever baggage, that rucksack that I like to use that analogy that we fill that rucksack up with the rucksack of life, right? And some of my stuff from childhood was in there. Rachel had some stuff from childhood in hers. And, and then everything that we've been talking about up to this point, where we're in this new town, new job, and fresh start, but it was still rough because Rachel was having a hard time with looking at me, to be honest with you. Like, man, do I really want this guy back? And I was having a hard time with the fact, well, do I want to keep hearing about my past, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we were only there for like 4 months. And, I think that time I was on the fence. I wasn't I wanted Rachel. I wanted my family. I didn't want that destruction that I left, but I was on the fence on whether it would work. Like, would we possibly recover from something like this and actually be happy and not just love one another, but like each other? And I was on the fence with that until 4 months into that job. I got sent to a call with another officer of Burglary in Progress, where we would encounter a guy with a gun that would stand about 5 feet in front of me and the other officer. We had a small triangle formed. He pulled a gun out, and there'd be 17 shots fired between the three of us in 5 seconds. And he would the suspect would pass away, and the shots he fired at us would come close, dangerously close, but he didn't shoot or hit either one of us. But I just got to thinking, like, when the dust settled, or the smoke settled, if you will, from that shooting that night, I remember thinking, man, if I would have died tonight, this would be my legacy, right? I would have a 7-year-old who, like, he wanted a new dad, a wife that was broken, a 6-month-old daughter, or year-old daughter, Kirsten, that wouldn't remember me. And I thought, man, it was during that time period, I thought, you know what? I need to really make different decisions, and I need to go all in with giving this to God. And then that's what I did. I would make decisions like I would go from night shift to day shift, so I'd go to church with my family, and I would make an intentional effort to seriously align my life with the life that God created me to live.
And that's awesome. I know a lot about this already, but I want to kind of hone in on this next part. So this is the mending portion now. So you're going from a transition where you've made a conscious decision that going forward, this is how I'm going to live. And it's worth a fight at that point, right? You and Rachel, you are making a commitment. You're going to serve God, and you are going to mend this marriage, and you're going to make it work. And I remember you telling me, not just me, but you've told many others about that mending period of now you're taking your kids to school in your squad car, and you're doing devotions with them. Walk us through that process of it, from what your kids seen before and wanting a new dad to what that next portion of what God did in your life will show you.
Yeah, man. When I started to really lean into my faith, we would join a church, and I would go through the discipleship process. Like, I remember during that time, there'd be some men, I call them Texas Baptist men, with cracked hands and cracked Bibles, and look me in the face and say, hey, you need to buckle your pants up and be a man. And, this is what that looks like, a lot different from the type of manhood I learned in the Marine Corps, which is important. But I think the most important is biblical manhood. And they would walk me through the pages of scripture, kind of like what we do at Mighty Oaks. Mighty Oaks still wasn't around then, but like I said, same concept. These guys would walk me through the Bible. We'd go to church. We'd be part of a life group, which is like Sunday school. I would meet guys like corner men. We called them accountability partners back then. God would, the way he would work in that. Like, I remember we went to our pediatrician. He was new. And at this point, Kaden, our youngest, was born. So our adult kids now are 33, 26, and 21. Caden, as we're going through this mending process, Rachel gets pregnant with Caden. He's born. We go to the doctor, and I'm in the room with Rachel and Caden, and I'm reading my Bible. And doctor's like, hey, what are you reading? And I'm like, James. He's like, yeah, I can see that, but what are you reading in James? And then I tell him, he goes like, hey, who's holding you accountable? And I was like, nobody. And he says, well, I have a group that meets every week at Denny's. Why don't you come? So I came, and man, that would start a relationship with us for years of accountability, where I'd meet with his group, or it would just be me and him one-on-one. And God had used other guys like him. So it was basically being intentional, not just intentional, but obedient, because, these are not just ideas, but it's what God's word says. Like, there's scripture that says, hey, be in the word, be in prayer, be in fellowship, be in touch with the corner man, right? Verses like, as iron sharpens iron, so does one man to another. And other verses similar to that, right? Yeah. And so I would start to do that and do those things. And it would still be roller coastery. We'd have our ups and downs. It's not to say that everything was fine. It took several years for us to get a good groove in healthy home life and really integrating faith and at work and stuff like that too. But we would get at a point where Rachel would see some significant change. She would even say, she goes, man, if I had to do that all over again for you to be the man that you are today, I would. And I'm like, man, I never thought I would hear anything like that. And that's not anything that Kevin can do. That's only something that God can do.
Yes.
And so, and it's hope. I mean, everything, if anybody gets anything out of this story, it's hope. Like, the Bible talks about in Isaiah that God can bring beauty from the ashes. And that's what I've seen. Like, as I say this podcast right now, Rachel's in the backyard with our daughter and her daughter, our newest grandchild, who's 8 months years old, right? 8 months years old. That doesn't make sense. 8 months old. And, and I'm hearing the noises back there and stuff like that. And man, like Caden wasn't even born when we went through all this. I mean, none of this was on my radar. Our third child, grandkids, my granddaughter the one that's here looks just like our daughter when she was that age. And that was the age where we were going through hell. Mm-hmm. So it's almost like God's giving me, like, it's a God wink. It's like, hey, this is what you missed out on, and it's just like his grace and his mercy and his steadfast love are so much better than settling.
So there is, fast forwarding a little bit now, because I believe this next portion of it is when you're a patrol lieutenant. And I love when you talk about this, because I love how you portray yourself as this patrol lieutenant. So I want to focus on this. And there's a part I want to gather about when you are put into another situation and you pick up the phone to call your wife. Now, this is when both of you are relying on God. You both know that this is like, no matter what, God's the only thing that can bring us out. Walk us through this next situation of when you pick up the phone in a very troubling situation and what your wife says. I would really like to focus on that for a second.
Yeah, man, that on the fence shooting, that happened in 2000. And so 17 years sounds like a long time later. I would be in a similar situation physically, but definitely in a different spot in my marriage and my walk with God and everything, right? Like 17 years, he would take the beauty from the ashes. We would serve in our church, we were involved in mission trips, and we were really growing our faith. I was doing some church planning type stuff, some lay ministry and all that. And, so I'm now at this point in my career where I got promoted lieutenant and I was going to be in patrol. So, I show up to work. I remember, a lot of times I didn't have to wear a full uniform. Like that first 2 weeks, I remember wearing BDUs and a polo and like badge and gun. And I remember standing out, in front of report writing with another lieutenant and my captain. And I'm just, we're holding our coffee, and all the officers in report writing are just like, man, those are the heroes of the department looking at us, right? That anybody look at us that way. But, we're just standing out there. I'm thinking, man, I can, like, my mindset, it kind of changed because I had when I was a sergeant, I was in an undercover unit where we were posing as people that, so we had a big problem with people getting carjacked and stuff like that. So we would try to put ourselves in situations like that as undercover. So it was kind of a dynamic police environment, pretty fun actually. And then I go into this patrol lieutenant, I'm thinking, man, I'm never going to have to barge through a door, pull the trigger anymore, or anything. So my mentality kind of changed, which is dangerous. It's dangerous in life and it's dangerous as a Christian, right? Mm-hmm. And so, while we're talking, they're standing there drinking our coffee, the radio cracks open and some officers are screaming out like shots fired, we're in pursuit. And a guy had committed murder in a town just south of us. He got pursued in our town and they lost him. And the next day he stole a car and they were able to continue the pursuit. And we weren't too far from that. So my captain's like, hey, let's get in your car and we're going to go. So we get to where the pursuit is just as he crashed in front of a CVS. And, we pull up, he's inside and he shot out the glass doors, the entry doors. And I put an outer vest on, got my 12 gauge and me and the other lieutenant and the captain go inside. And, it's basically we have an active shooter. And I just remember walking through the doorway and it was just like, it's like getting sucked into a vacuum, like a situation like that. It reminded me a lot of like when you've been around like impending death or situations like that. I remember thinking when I walked through there, I was like, man, somebody's going to die today. And, I wasn't so sure that it wasn't going to be me. Right. And so I remember going inside and trying to hunker down behind an end cap just because, get the mirrors all like all pharmacies have and everything. I just remember thinking, man, I was like, 17 years ago, I thought I was 10 feet tall, bulletproof. I realized that day that I was just 6 feet tall and fat, and I remember thinking, that morning I had some words with my son, Matt, who was dating who his wife is now. And they had some type of tiff, and he had said some words, and I kind of gave him the what for. And I was like, man, I need to give him a call. And I got razzed, for asking for a phone in a gunfight. But, that other lieutenant who had the TJ Hooker stance, I was like, hey, can I have your phone? And, I called Rachel on the phone. I said, hey, this is what's going on. And apparently there was a news chopper or something up that already had it on air. And she was like, yeah, I know. And I was like, hey, I don't know how this is going to end, but just tell Matt that I love him. And she said 2 words before she hung up. She said, you fight. And then she hung the phone up. And, man, it was like something clicked. I'm like, I was there to fight. And, I was not creating a safety hazard. The suspect was in the pharmacy. He was holding the pharmacist hostage. We would later find out he was just trying to build up a cocktail to get the courage to kill himself, which he did. And, so we were still, other officers were entering the building and stuff. So we had some good cover and stuff. So, anyway, when she said those words, just my mentality clicked. It's like, man, you're never out of the fight, and, I need to get in here mentally and be prepared physically. So, it'd be a short time after that, we'd hear a shot fired, which was the suspect killing himself. But it was just a reminder for me, like in my Christian walk, like I have to have this fight mentality all the time. It's like me and you were talking before, you started recording. We have an adversary that the scripture talks about that roars around like a lion, seeing whom he may devour. And the book of Revelation says that he knows his time is short. In Revelation chapter 12, and, an animal that's backed in a corner is mad, right? So we're always in the fight as Christians. And, but not just that, whether I'm in a law enforcement career or wherever I'm at, like my mindset has to be sharp and ready, so God has definitely used Rachel in my life. A lot of times that word helper in the Bible, if you get the original translation, the spouse being a helper, the wife being a helper, it has to do a lot with accountability. And I feel like God has used Rachel in a lot of ways, but definitely in that.
Man. So how many years after that situation was it till you retired from law enforcement?
So that would happen in 2017, and I retired in 2018. That was my 21-year mark. I could have stayed. But it was just a good season. I'd been a patrol lieutenant for 3 years, and, man, the higher up, at least in that department that I worked, that you get, the more the battle is inside the walls and not outside. So it wasn't an environment for me to thrive in, and it was just, and I always felt this pull to ministry, and I'd already been through Mighty Oaks, like a couple years prior to that. Which, that helped. What Mighty Oaks did in my life as a mature believer was sharpen me more, and it got legacy on my radar more than it ever had been, right? So I credit to how God has used Mighty Oaks on that day too, in that CBS. But anyway, I was contracting, I was a team leader and stuff, and the opportunity arose for me to be able to retire and come to work for Mighty Oaks.
So how long have you worked for Mighty Oaks now since retirement?
7 years, yeah, on my 7th year.
And you're not just a team leader, so everybody knows. You are a program manager, if I'm saying the role correctly. And so you walk us through like what you do with this organization. What does that look like?
So I'll work about between 5 and 7 sessions a year where I'm the program manager at the session. And when I'm not at a session, I do remote work at home, like leader development, like guys that want to be team leaders. Like we have, about 20 or so in the pipeline right now, whether in phase 1 or phase 2 to become a team leader. So I spend time with them in Zoom training them. We do teach backs for the class they're going to teach. We do Zoom training on how to lead a breakout. A lot different training from what I got and from what you got. But yeah, we're a lot more intentional now. Before guys go to sessions, they get like 2 Zoom meetings. One's training, one's doing their teach back. And so doing things like that, scheduling the staff for the sessions that we have, like we're having 31 men's sessions this year. And so I run the schedule for that and do the fill-ins for guys that got to cancel. And, do some speaking events at churches or police departments, scheduled to go to Peru in May because we are training the Peruvian military to do resiliency programs like we do them here. So that'd be my 3rd time going to Peru to be a part of that. But that's kind of the gist of it.
Awesome. So now I want to kind of touch, so we've walked through all of this process of your life and the struggles and stuff that you had, and now you're in the transition period where you're learning to give back. How did that look like when you and I met from your perspective as you helped mentor me? What was that process like? What did it look like from your perspective there?
It's been one of the most rewarding things because, I get to encounter guys, or gals, depending on the event that I'm at, they are in situations where they feel like there's no hope. And I think one of the biggest things that impacts people that come through Mighty Oaks is the transparency, right? Like everybody that has a part of a staff at a session teaches a class and you share your testimony. And it is the most raw version that you could get of somebody's testimony, right? And, we have the time to unpack it a little bit more. Like you heard the broad version, I guess, of the testimony, but we get to talk about some of the really in the ditch things, right? And so, that impacts people because it just kind of opens the doors for them to be transparent and real and just speak that hope into it, right? So it's just amazing to be able to see because it also shows me like what God is doing. Like none of this is work of Kevin. Right. Like you and I met at a Lone Survivor event and, I had no idea that years later now, that within 5 years, like you would become a team leader with Mighty Oaks or doing a podcast now together. Like these are things that God is lining up and just be able to be a part of it. It's just, it's really fulfilling.
Yes, it is. It blows me away, to be honest with you. I haven't done as many programs as you have, but I've been a part of quite a few. And it is so rewarding to sit back and we can show up on Sunday when we all get there, we collaborate, we start prepping for the week and things like that. And then everyone shows up on Monday. And how rewarding is it to see the looks on their faces, the baggage that they're carrying, just, the hurt, the pain, all the stuff that you see all these men walk in with. And then to see them Thursday night, just the drastic change. I mean, you can see the progression through the week, but Thursday, I think it is so rewarding to look and see, man, look what God has done over a period of 4 days. It's so incredible.
It is.
How many sessions do you think you've done that you've literally been able to see from someone who came in? I know this personally because I was there at this session, who came in as an atheist or agnostic, someone who you thought would never turn, believe, transition, or even put any thought process into becoming a Christian. And then you get to see the reverse side of that. How often do you think you've seen that happen?
I've seen stories like that from, I was averaging from about 2018 to 2023, about 12 to 15 sessions a year, which was not sustainable. That was a long enough period to do that. I had to really back off some of those sessions. But to answer your question, we get to see it a lot. Whether it's, people that have church hurt, that years of bad experience at church, or agnostic or atheist, or just Christians who feel like, man, they're just struggling, and I've just seen at every session, just life change, drastic life change. That's why it's so hard to describe to people. Like, hey, you should go to a Mighty Oak session. This is why. You can't, and I always tell them, I said, you're going to remember these words, but you can't put words unless you go. I mean, it's a work of God, because you're only there for 3 full days, Monday and Friday are not full days. Yeah, man, it's just amazing to be able to see that transformation.
Yes, it is. All right. What would you have in the last few minutes left? What would you say words of encouragement to anybody out there that may be struggling with the things you just mentioned, church hurt to, just life hurts in general? What would you say encouragement wise? What would your message be to them?
Yeah, it's, we were talking about that enemy a little bit, and he wants to put these blinders on us to make us think that there's no hope, there's no way out. And one of the things that we do at Mighty Oaks is we replace those superficial feelings, those false ideas or beliefs, intrusive thoughts, replace those with the promise of God's word, right? Like one of the Bible verses that I cling to and have ever since that that time that when me and Rachel were getting back together, moved to the new town, started over, I dealt with a lot of guilt and shame. I had survivor's guilt over some deaths that happened at work. I had guilt over what I had done and in my marriage and how I was representing God to my kids. And I was dealing with depression. It would get me down. I was like, man, I was very skeptical, and Philippians 1:6, man, when I encountered that, God would use that and he welded it to my heart, pun intended. And, that he who began a good work in you will bring it to completion. And I was like, wow, me coming to faith and everything, that's a work of God. And I don't have to depend on Kevin or rely on myself that I'm going to have purpose or identity. I just need to trust the Lord. He who began a good work in you will bring it to completion. So that's one of the verses, that I cling to, but I would sum up your question in that verse right now. Anybody that is struggling maybe with faith, that's never surrendered their life to Christ, that God has a purpose and plan for you. It's all in the pages of Scripture. And for those who are a believer or follower of Christ, but life is not like it should be, God can turn that around. And we just have to align our lives with the life he created us to live. We do that by getting into the Scriptures and being obedient, So, and, this sounds kind of cliche, but, those questions of the week that we have at a session, that one question, if what you're doing isn't working, why not try something else, right? And man, that's what it boils down to. And no one has taken away from us or can take away from us the ability to make different decisions. And if what you're doing isn't working, I used to say, I think this is that something else. And I'm like, I know it's that something else. Because if it wasn't, you and I wouldn't be talking today here. Mm-hmm. Right? Like life would look so much different for us, So yeah. Hope
man, Kevin, it does, man. That's powerful. It's so good to hear just from the beginning of this, growing up as a child, the things that you faced obviously in your childhood, and then all the way to the marriage. And I know for a fact it's a tough marriage. There's so many similarities in our stories. It's so crazy to think, because I got married right away too. Then I deployed immediately right away. And so we battled some of those same things, and we got pregnant immediately right away. And I know, man, it was so strong. It was tough. My wife was very close to her family and never was away. So there's so many similarities. So I know that struggle, and it's hard to put into words to people to get them to realize like how much we take for granted being together. And then just to see the transition all the way through, all the things that you and your wife went through, the kids, and then to where you are today. It's just incredible to see this and to know that there's only one way this can happen. It's not through some secular marriage counseling. It's not through some psychologist or anything else, but it's literally through the power of Jesus Christ. It's having a relationship with Jesus Christ. And that is the one thing that a lot of these marriages that are failing are missing, is just that relationship with Christ. So, Kevin, it has been an incredible pleasure to have you here. I mean, you're a great friend of mine. I absolutely love to be around you. Like I said before, we have tons of fun times together we've had. So, So it's been an incredible to have you here, man. I appreciate you taking the time to share your story and stuff with us. And it's not just a story, man. It is literally a testimony. So I appreciate that.
Well, thanks for the opportunity.
Yes, sir. Anytime. We can always do a rerun. We could do a part 2, part 3, part 4. And congratulations on the pastoralship. That's 2 things today that I learned. I did not know that yet. So, yeah. Man, that's incredible. And I'm super happy for you. And man, I'll have to make a pop in on your church service sometime.
Come on.
I'll bring it, man. So again, it's been a pleasure to have you here. But for everybody out there, thank you for watching the Ready to Fight podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe and hit that bell so you always know when another podcast is going to be coming. We appreciate you following me on this journey and everyone else. And we thank you so much. Stay tuned because there is many, many more coming. And don't forget, never give up. Always keep in a fight. Remember to always keep God in the center of everything you do. And until next time, thank you all for watching. I appreciate it. All right, Kevin.